Chapter 12:29, Collective Wisdom. Seeing that Miss Magician had yet to react, Klein made the world add, "You don't need to be there. Just summon my historical projection in advance." "All right," Fors nodded hurriedly. At that moment, because Jayaman Sparrow had accepted his mission, Emlyn clearly relaxed. From what he knew, this meant that the success rate of the matter had skyrocketed. In the next second, the world looked at him and hoarsely asked, "What kind of payment can you provide?" Emlyn fell silent for 2 seconds before saying with his eyes darting upward slightly, "Once I become a Shaman King, I'll provide a free promise on similar matters. Also, I only want the Shaman King's Beyonder characteristic. The members of the Rose School of Thought Temperance faction should have a clear goal. The rest will be yours." Mr. Moon isn't very stolid. He doesn't have much confidence. Through his actions and words, Audrey came to a conclusion. This fellow, Emlyn, has learned how to use consumption loans. Klein secretly laughed and made the world indifferently reply, "It looks like you can only afford a demigod like me. If Mr. Moon can provide a large amount of food, I don't mind participating." Justice Audrey mumbled inwardly. However, she didn't need to say anything to know what Mr. Moon would say. Why would we Sanguine be hoarding so many snacks? To the Sanguine, their staple was the blood of humans with abundant spirituality. Bread and meat products were all non-essentials. Seeing that the world Jayaman Sparrow didn't reject his offer, Emlyn secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "What other requests do you have? I'll try my best to fulfill them." Jayaman Sparrow thought for a moment before saying, "Give me a mystical item or a sealed artifact that can greatly increase the wielder's spirituality for a short period of time." This was for Miss Magician, allowing her to maintain the historical void projection for a few more minutes. And there was no doubt that the Moon Domain had such Beyonder powers. For example, the Scarlet Scholar could create a full moon state, allowing their spirituality to be enhanced. Phew. Emlyn quickly nodded. "All right, no problem." Seeing that the human and vampire had come to an agreement, Fors hurriedly raised her hand and said, "No full moon." That way, ignoring the enhancement of her spirituality, she would be considered lucky if she didn't die on the spot. After all, the higher the sequence, the clearer one could hear Mr. Door's ravings. Fors had long since advanced from sequence 6 Scribe to sequence 5 Traveler. Emlyn also knew about Miss Magician's full moon curse, so he had no questions about it. He acknowledged tersely, indicating that he had taken note. At this moment, Alger, who was listening to the completed transaction beside him, said in thought, "Although the Beyonders of the Rose School of Thought are easily controlled by their emotions and instincts, this didn't mean that their brains had already disappeared along with their zombification. Even if they're gone, they still have members of the Moon Domain. Since their demigods were directly involved in the Southern Continent's war and have exposed their locations, they wouldn't dismiss the possibility of an attack from the Sanguine and Temperance faction. I believe there's a high chance of them laying a trap." "That's right," Leonard echoed. "Many dossiers indicate that, although the Beyonders of the Rose School of Thought are well known for indulging themselves in bloodshed, cruelty, and desires, they still act very meticulously. Their actions show certain cunningness and sinisterness." Zio glanced at her friend and said, "I encountered a supernatural incident involving the Rose School of Thought 2 months ago. The target was obviously deceived and fell into a trap." The world Jayaman Sparrow listened attentively before scoffing. He then said to Emlyn, "Which Shaman King is your target?" Emlyn didn't hide anything. The Shaman King, who led the natives from East Balam's North Alite County to attack the Lone's main colonial city. Upon hearing this, a thought flashed across Klein's mind. The Mother Tree of Desire doesn't seem to want the goddess to control the uniqueness of the death pathway. She was driving the natives and using the war to waver the fundamental faith of the Church of Evernight in the Southern Continent. As this thought flashed through his mind, he made the world Jayaman Sparrow look at Emlyn and chuckle. "Then my target will be another Shaman King. This has nothing to do with your operation." There was no need for him to be too direct. Emlyn, Katlia, and company quickly understood his plan. This was a simple plan. Jayaman Sparrow hunted another Shaman King and took the initiative to step into a trap to attract the hidden forces of the Rose School of Thought. And at that moment, the Moon and the Rose School of Thought's temperance faction would take the opportunity to attack the real target. "Isn't this too dangerous?" Emlyn subconsciously replied. The danger was, of course, directed to Jayaman Sparrow, who would be walking into a trap. The world Jayaman Sparrow replied very calmly, "It will just be a historical projection. If he dies, so be it." Upon hearing such an answer, Emlyn, Leonard, and the other members of the Tarot Club were at a loss as to what expression to show as a response. It was unknown if they should reflect on the fact that Sequence 3 demigods were different, or be envious that scholars of yore had such beyonder powers. Klein continued to let the world speak. "If the Rose School of Thought has any doubts about my sudden attack, and only divert a portion of their strength to stop me so as to still maintain a relatively complete trap, then I will try to hunt that shaman king seriously and turn the false target into the true target. After all you want is the corresponding items. You don't care who the original owner is." A simple but effective plan. The key point is that Jayaman Sparrow has to have a strength that exceeds his limits, one that can put up resistance even when facing an angel. Audrey learned from him seriously and evaluated this inwardly. Emlyn no longer had any doubts. After some thought, he said, "Before the official operation, I need to meet with the members of the Rose School of Thought Temperance faction to finalize the details." The world Jayaman Sparrow nodded and said, "Make arrangements for it." After the exchange, Klein made the world conjure a paper stack and distributed it to the members of the Tarot Club. "Some existences, and I will be dealing with a mythical creature. You can raise your opinion and share your thoughts." The piece of paper was written with the character and actions of the dark demonic wolf, Cotter, as well as the various analysis Miss Justice had made. He hoped that he could find inspiration through different people, with their different personalities and knowledge. Mythical creature. The world has set his sights on mythical creatures. Alger, who had been much quieter than usual, couldn't help but look at the bottom end of the long bronze table. Although he was already mentally prepared for this, he felt that he wouldn't be surprised even if the world Jayaman Sparrow suddenly called himself an angel. However, when he realized that the other party was really targeting a mythical creature, he couldn't help but feel a little shocked and perturbed. Katlia had similar feelings as well, but she immediately recalled the Snake of Fate, the Death Console, and the Ancient Bane. This matched the Jayaman Sparrow's words of "some existences." It was very normal for 3 angels, and a Sequence 3 blessed to hunt a mythical creature. One by one, they retracted their gazes from the bottom end of the long, mottled table, and they began reading the information in their hands seriously. At this moment, as they weren't involved in the commission or involved in a transaction, nor were they sharing information. Yet, the members of the Tarot Club had a baffling feeling of working together for one common goal. They felt like they were starting to feel like an organization. After reading the contents, Alger was the first to speak. According to Miss Justice's analysis, no bait will trap that paranoid mythical creature. It will only push him to escape further. Under the situation of him, suspected to wield a Sequence 1 beyonder characteristic, he really doesn't need to chase after other things. Advancing himself is the most important thing at hand. If you want to deal with him, we can only consider it from this point of view. Upon hearing this, Zio said from a professional point of view, "But this mythical creature is very cautious. He doesn't leave any clues behind, and according to the intel, the location he can use to prepare for the Sequence 1 ritual isn't actually restricted in an environment like the Forsaken Land of the Gods. Yes, there are too many monsters for him to use." Derek confirmed what Miss Judgment had said. There was silence immediately. Leonard thought for a moment and said, "Can we rely on the law of beyonder characteristics convergence?" As he spoke, he looked at Klein Moretti. "That mythical creature seems to be from the same pathway as you. Just relying on the effect that comes from the convergence of beyonder characteristic at this level to chance upon this mythical creature might take a year or 2, perhaps even longer. Furthermore, the other party is a complete mythical creature. He has the ability to cause some interference." Klein overruled Leonard's suggestion. Of course, if he augmented the power of Sephra Castle onto himself, he might be able to meet the dark demonic wolf the next time he used the Staff of the Stars' random teleportation. However, the problem was that if that happened, the chances of a coincidental encounter with Ammon would be much, much higher. This was the standard way of knocking on death's door. After hearing everyone's discussion, Catlia said in thought, according to what the queen found taboo, "Can we use this mythical creature's honorific name to establish a connection?" If the dark demonic wolf hadn't been tracked by Ammon in the past, that might have been possible. But now, what can be thought must have been thought of by Ammon. Under such circumstances, the fact that the dark demonic wolf hasn't perished implies that he is wary of such matters. The World Jayamon Sparrow slowly shook his head. With his paranoid character, he definitely wouldn't respond automatically. Just as he said that, he suddenly had an idea. Not receiving a response from the dark demonic wolf didn't mean that he wouldn't pay attention to the corresponding prayer light.